Tomorrow, all eyes will be on the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana, as he delivers the highly anticipated 2025 budget speech. With South Africa's facing numerous economic challenges, the focus is firmly on how government plans to deal with some of these challenges. The Budget Justice Coalition is making a strong push for a people-centered budget, highlighting critical issues like the public sector wage bill. They will argue that the problem isn't the number of public workers, but rather the distribution and effectiveness of that. Joining us now this morning to delve deeper into these crucial points is Matshidiso Lencoasa, who is a budget analyst from Section27. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. So it seems that the budget will actually happen. We'll have a budget 3.0, but I want to go to the point that you stress in one of your opinion pieces. The real issue is not the absolute size of the public sector wage bill, but it is the composition and effectiveness of it. Explain.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to delve into this, especially ahead of this historic budget 3.0. And so what we see is that, this budget being tabled in May, yes, there's been a lot of political contestation, but maybe it's an opportunity to start thinking about how the national budget can actually solve some of the issues that we have in our country. There have been issues or accusations around a bloated public sector by many people in the country, including politicians who would criticize certain points and say that the reason for this is because we spend too much on the public sector. But at the same time, if you walk into a public clinic, if you walk into a public school, nobody is complaining about too many. Instead, rather what we see is overcrowding in these spaces. And then also at the same time, we have a doctor shortage of newly qualified doctors who are sitting at home, but at the same time, they're not being able to be absorbed, and they are ready to be absorbed by the public system, but they're not being absorbed. And so there's a mismatch regarding our budget. So we spend a lot on our public healthcare or our public education and on teachers, on doctors, but we're not having enough. And so we're really seeing this budget as an opportunity to address this problem in a context of persistent unemployment in our country, so that we can actually solve the problems that, it can get to the heart of the problems in our country and really solve those for the people in our country.
Is it a question of, because we're looking at about, close to about 40% of government's budget going to the wage bill, a question of, are we getting value for money?
Yes, so that is a very important question, and one in order to define what is value for money, I think that if South Africans, as we do, paying our taxes, paying VAT, whatever it is, we expect good quality public healthcare systems and good quality public education. You expect that if you get sick, you will be attended to when you go to a clinic. But then what we end up seeing is that when people do go to clinics, there are long lines. It takes, there's delays and there's poor quality of healthcare. South Africans don't deserve that. And in that context, currently, we're not getting value for our money, but we could have value for our money by investing more efficiently, more strategically in ensuring that we actually build the number of doctors, the number of teachers, and number of nurses, and rather remove the bloatedness that seems to be happening rather at the top.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with one of the commissioners from the Public Service Commission, and asking him that if you look at what Elon Musk has done with Dodge, is it something that South Africa should explore? And his argument was that the Public Service Commission has already been doing all of that work, and the proposals are there to speak to this very question around the targeted interventions that says that let's rather have a system that says that, do we need so many teachers, as an example, or are we saying that what are the type of teachers actually that the country needs?
Yes, I think that, I would agree with him regarding the question. So for years, there has been a concerted effort to decrease the number of doctors, the number of teachers, and the number of nurses in the healthcare system and education system. We saw that covertly, there have been budget cuts that have reduced those numbers, and that was like answering the question of, do we need so many teachers? But now we see that we actually do. We do need, the question isn't about the number of teachers, but it's actually the quality and where they're situated in the system. I think speaking to the doctor issue, the poll that you had, one of the options was about rural incentives and all the options to address the doctor shortages. And the truth is, the budget is a powerful tool to do that. It's just that perhaps we're not asking asking the right questions on that. But with the budget being during May, this could be during Workers' Month, this could be an opportunity to actually get to the heart of answering the questions that really matter to build a public sector that really works for people in our country.
Yeah. How do you see that targeted intervention play out? If, let's say, the minister is listening to this conversation and says that Matshidiso makes a good argument there, but what would that targeted intervention look like? Because here, your argument is that it's almost a blanket approach that has been taken by the state, that yes, we have to implement austerity measures because of our budgetary constraints and a GDP that is not growing. But then on the other end, the targeted interventions, what do those look like with their complexities as well?
Absolutely. So the first area, of course, what we say you can't get around from is that we do need to skill and equip our frontline services. So we do need to be prioritize. This budget needs to prioritize absorbing doctors, nurses, teachers. So in terms of budget allocations, that we support allocating towards that rather than reducing the public sector at the bottom, at the front line. In addition to that, we're also looking towards improving the efficiency of government, so getting value for our money, ensuring that there is building capacity in the provinces to actually spend the money. Because what we do see is while government does spend on its public sector, when it comes to ring-fenced areas like infrastructure or other areas, provinces, even urban provinces that are more well-resourced like Gauteng, and end up returning money back to Treasury or, underspending. And so we need to address that underspending, wasteful expenditure or irregular expenditure, and consequence management investment. We'd love to see interventions around that. We'd love to see capacity building and incentives towards capacitation. One example that you had brought up is the rural health incentive around looking at what are the issues that are being faced in rural provinces like the Eastern Cape. How do we get doctors? How do we get nurses and doctors in those areas? And really building a collaborative way of approaching it rather than a treasury telling the departments or the provinces, this is what you have, but really listening to the people on the ground and saying, these are the struggles that they're facing. This is how much we have, and this is how we're going to address that. So more public participation in shaping that, but really just prioritizing the front line instead of having a bloated public sector that's happening at the top or happening in Parliament, but rather happening from at the front line.
Yeah. In the next short while after the break, we'll be in conversation with Velinkosi Nihlabisa, the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, and we know that the coal-face service delivery, the coal-face service delivery happens at local government level. That is where it takes place. And we all interact with local government. Whether you're a national building, a multinational company, the brick and mortar building is actually in one municipality or a municipality. We're going to be discussing the review of the white paper on local government. What do you think that review should also include when it comes to what you're stressing about, that is the frontline service providers?
Sure. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation because local government has been struggling for a long time. I think we've seen that as people who participate, like you say, the coal face, but also when you look at the numbers, the underspending, the poor spending, and the funding issues that they have. And so I really do think that this white paper or this conversation should prioritize looking at how do we make the national budget, the provincial and the local speak to each other. There are decisions that are being made at a national level, and to National Treasury's credit, there's a lot of transparency around availability of information. But when you look at local governments and municipalities and even hospitals, a lot of people, everyday people, don't know what the budget is around that, where the irregularities are. So I think one thing that we'd love to see is the empowerment of people to do social audits, to be able to tag and report to government that our hospital was supposed to have X number of doctors, X number or nurses, but when we used it or when we used this clinic, what we ended up seeing is that there's been a shortage of this. There could potentially be a ghost employee, for instance, some kind of a process to ensure that kind of information is readily available, that's coming from the ground, so that the people at National Treasury at the top are making decisions that make sense to the needs that are happening at local government. So I think it's also a really important opportunity, the review of the local government, that white paper, but it shouldn't just be rhetoric, it should be more than that. And a powerful way to do that is by looking at the funding and ensuring that local government is equipped to do so.
Thank you so much for your time. Actually, the Minister will be joining us just after 7:30. That is the Chairperson of the Budget Justice Coalition, Matshidiso Lencoasa, around their expectations when the Minister of Finance delivers his budget speech again for the third time. tomorrow.